Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you today by East Coast Roofing, Siding, and Windows, serving all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up online, eastcoastroofing.com. Mosher's out today. Andrew DiCecco is in, and we'll get his insight on what he saw yesterday from an Eagles team that wins 17-16. They go down the field, and they do it running the football. So what is the identity of this team moving forward with no Dallas Goedert? We'll get into that. How impressed were you with the way the Eagles won that game? Let's get into it, as USA and Wales, by the way, have tied, which has forced a mad exodus here at the Gallery Bar Book. People not too happy with the tie in the first game here. But let's bring Andrew in and look at the American football as he joins us for another edition of Football at 4. What's going on, Andrew?
Mike and Ryan, what's going on? How's that for a curveball? DiCecco on a Monday.
Yes, we like the day after breakdown from you. Let me get your thoughts on the offense yesterday. How much were they affected, do you think, by not having Dallas Goedert? How much of it was play call? What do you kind of read, Andrew, about the Eagles' offensive woes, if you will, yesterday?
Well, the Eagles won that game despite Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni. I really thought that the adjustment to life without Dallas Goedert was very turbulent, and it was very apparent when you saw that he lacked that intermediary option, and Jack Stoll, who played 81% of the snaps, by the way, isn't that guy. Tyree Jackson, he was also penalized. And Grant Calcaterra as well. Like they really were missing. Dallas Goedert is instrumental to this offense and how it ultimately works. And not having that option over the middle, it affects RPO. It affects the way everything goes. And I think that knowing how emotional Nick Sirianni is, this was a big week for him. And I really do feel like the magnitude of this game really weighed on him throughout the week. And he really wasn't calling games as he usually does. And as a head coach, you have to put all that aside and be able to execute and focus on the task at hand. And I felt that he was sort of it was in the back of his mind, the whole Frank Reich deal and just coming back to Indy and trying to get that win. And I think ultimately him and Shane Steichen really it seemed like they almost outsmarted themselves in many regards. And I thought that they won the game in spite of them.
Do you think that the Goddard absence had as big of an impact as you thought it would?
Yes, Dallas Goedert. We're talking about someone who might not be the tight end that a Travis Kelce is from a receiving standpoint, but arguably the most well-rounded tight end in the National Football League, and a security blanket for Jalen Hurts, and someone who he feels really comfortable with over the middle, and knowing that he can be a red zone presence and just that big body. And he also really helps the running game as a blocker as well. There's not much he can't do, and not having him in the lineup, I think it was a big adjustment for the team. Now I'm going to be interested to see if it was so much so that they want to address it by bringing in a veteran like perhaps a Jared Cook, or if they're going to try and go maybe three or four wide receiver sets at a higher frequency with guys like Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal. But they definitely need to do something there, and I think that his absence was felt very early on in this matchup.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people are wondering, was it just that? Was it the play calling? But as you kind of mentioned that, maybe Steichen and the play calling, maybe they kind of outthought themselves. But late in the game, they went back to their roots. They decided we're going to run the football. So without Goddard the next couple of weeks, do we anticipate that that's who they will be without him? Is a team like we saw last year that decides, you know what? We're going to get back to our running roots and run these games out until he gets back.
Yeah, I mean, look, they picked up 141 yards on 33 carries and a touchdown. That obviously was going back to their roots. So I think it behooves them to stick with what works, the formula that works for them. That Jalen Hurts obviously you don't want to see your quarterback run the ball 16 times, but I think if they could do other things, Mike, like implement a wide receiver screens a little bit more, or maybe get your running backs in on screen passes. Boston Scott's been very effective in that role. And I think Miles Sanders deserves an opportunity a little bit to kind of take in maybe own a bigger role as a receiver out of the backfield. So I think those are certain things that you might see them do to kind of try to mask the absence of Dallas Goedert, because it is such an enormous loss for this offense, because a lot of what it does revolves around Dallas Goedert.
Looking for a possible blessing in disguise while we're on this topic, Andrew, the blessing in disguise being during the Dallas Goedert absence, Devontae Smith looked like he was a focal point again, a real one in this offense, where it hasn't looked that way for the majority of this season. He seems to have gotten lost at times in this offense because of A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert and the running game and RPOs and, et cetera. Do you feel like this could be a blessing and Devontae can take advantage of this time period?
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. I mean, look, 9 targets for Devontae, 6 catches for, I believe, 78 yards. I think that he deserves a more sizable role in the offense. I think that he offers a lot from a short to intermediate route, can sort of fill that void in the absence of Dallas Goedert, as you alluded to already. But I also think he can threaten downfield a little bit too. I don't know that they've really tapped into his downfield element. But Devontae is a very sure-handed receiver, one of the best route runners already in the NFL, and he's an elite separator. I think they need to get him more involved in the offense and sort of spread it around a little bit more. You saw Quez Watkins pick up his first touchdown, I believe, since the Vikings game, which was nice to see. I think that they could really open things up downfield with him, which they really haven't had much of a downfield dimension to their offense. So I think there are certain things that they can kind of tap into, and then they'll have that moving forward when they do have Goddard and be much more well-rounded and probably better off in the long run.
Jonathan Taylor had some success, particularly in that first drive. Colts just all around had success offensively. What adjustments did you see Jonathan Gannon and the defense make to really step up, particularly in the second half?
Yeah, how about that? 7 carries for 47 yards, I believe, on that first drive, and only 37 the rest of the game, and a fumble. So I thought that he was a little bit more aggressive at the line of scrimmage with his players. I thought Sue and Linval Joseph were tremendous, and as advertised, they filled the role that the Eagles hoped that they would. I don't know that they anticipated them being that adept and stopping the run days after coming off the couch, so to speak. But I think that they were just a little bit more aggressive at the line of scrimmage and sold out really to defend the run. And, I mean, you saw a guy like Michael Pittman have a little bit of success on the outside, which we discussed on Thursday. But I thought that Jonathan Gannon really made the adjustments necessary in taking away their best player. I mean, only surrendering 37 yards after giving up 47 is pretty remarkable when you take into account the kind of player that Jonathan Taylor is, a top 3 or 4 running back in the NFL.
Absolutely, and you bring up Sue and Linval Joseph. I don't want to say stunned and be too dramatic here, but I was definitely shocked at the type of impact that they had just right away. What type of role, after seeing them yesterday, what type of roles do you envision them having in the short term and just the rest of the way?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? I got this question a couple times today already, just because Jordan Davis may come back by December 4th, and now all of a sudden you have an embarrassment of riches in the trenches there. So how do you allocate the snaps, right? Well, I think that there is going to be a role for everyone involved. Now, I think you might see them more in a situational, specialized role. I mean, remember, Jordan Davis is only playing, I believe it was like averaging like 22 snaps a game or something like that. Linval Joseph played 26 yesterday. So that speaks volumes of what they thought that he could bring to the defensive line. But I think you might see somewhere around what Sue played, about 17 snaps, 15 to 17 in a situational role. But I think they're all going to play have a significant impact in different ways throughout the rest of the way, because as we've seen in recent weeks, you can never have too many bodies there in the middle. I mean, Marlon Tuipulotu, I think it came out yesterday that they're going to shut him down for quite a while now with an MCL, I think it was, or meniscus. So, I mean, you can never have too many big bodies in there. And I think that Sue and Linval Joseph are really warming up. I mean, you saw them combine for a sack yesterday. Again, it's pretty remarkable when you take into account their age and their inactivity. So, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Andrew DiCecco's with us, Football at 4. when the defense last week, the issues that they had, they gave up 3 yards a carry, and people talking about that. I think Washington should get credit more for sticking with the run. I thought Indianapolis got away from the run. I thought Indianapolis, that one drive, they called 3 straight pass plays in a row after you just ran the ball very effectively. And I thought that Indianapolis kind of got out of what they did. And then after that drive, I thought the Philadelphia defense kind of found themselves. But I guess the question would be, moving forward here, do you think that John Gannon, if and when Jordan Davis comes back, that he will utilize that rotation between Davis and Joseph now more, that you'll be able to use more of those true nose guys, and that should maybe take this defense to another level, because it seemed that when Jordan Davis is out there, they're doing a decent job against the run. You take him off the field, and teams are running a little bit more. But if you can interchange Joseph and Davis, how much different does that make the defense?
Oh, it adds another layer to it, Mike. And now you have 2 different guys, and Sue, who you can throw in there, and he can rush the passer as well. I mean, 6 sacks last season. I really do think that teams are still going to try and run on the Eagles. I think teams are going to look at what the Colts did, and you're right. They got away from the run. They abandoned that far too early. That was their bread and butter. That was their recipe and key to victory. And for some reason, they decided to let Matt Ryan sit back there and throw the ball 32 times. When obviously the passing game is not their forte. So teams are going to continue to run on the Eagles, and I think now you have a healthy rotation of linemen that all specialize in different things, and I think that Jonathan Gannon will find a way to deploy all of them effectively.
Andrew, I just want your thoughts on what the Dallas Cowboys did, just issuing a good old-fashioned beatdown to the Minnesota Vikings, a matchup that was highly anticipated and talked about leading all the way up to kickoff yesterday at 4:25. What do you make of that? How does that potentially change your outlook at the top of the NFC?
Well, I mean, that was a statement win for Dallas, but it's just a weird season, Ryan. Like week to week, I mean, I don't know that you could use that game as a barometer for how good the Cowboys are. I mean, I don't know that they're 38 points better than the Minnesota Vikings. Teams they stuck it to them. Minnesota played a horrible game. Kirk Cousins played a horrible game. Dallas is a good football team, but so are the Vikings. It was a really weird week. I do think that Dallas can threaten the Eagles for the NFC East. The Eagles' margin for error is very small, but I still believe firmly that the Eagles are the better team. But we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of football left to be played and a lot of jockeying for positioning there. So, like I said, the margin for error is really small because Dallas, they're creeping up. If if the Eagles slip up, it could get ugly.
Well, I mean, Andrew, we watch football all the time. You cover the game, obviously, and teams go through lulls. I mean, they go through the ups and downs of a 17-game season. But the good teams figure out ways to win even when they're not playing their best. But when I look at Philadelphia right now, it's not only that they're not playing their best, it's coupled with part of the reason maybe they're not playing their best is they're not at full strength. But that kind of shows you that they can find extra ways to win. But moving forward here, do you think, after watching that game yesterday, teams will try to say to Jalen Hurts, hey, we want you to throw the ball more to try to beat us. You're not going to run the ball down the field on us like you did to beat the Colts. Do teams say, we want to see if you can throw your team to victory?
Yeah, I think that's fair, Mike. I mean, when you look at that last drive, that game-winning drive, he completed one pass for 8 yards to A.J., and the rest of it was collected with his legs and via the running game, which that was a bizarre sequence, by the way. I mean, Boston Scott mixed in on that drive. I don't really know what was going on there, but yes, I do think that that is going to be the approach moving forward. Teams would much rather, if they had their druthers, they'd much rather say, okay, let's see if Hurts can beat us with his arm. And I mean, you look at that final drive, they sort of took the ball out of his hands. Now, with that said, Hurts did what he needed to do to win. There was opportunities there, running lanes were there, and that's the way that he went. And I mean, I think that what you said to start that question, good teams find ways to win, and the Eagles did, and they aren't at full strength. So I think that speaks volumes of where they're at and their commitment to each other and what they can do. I think that they're a really a really high-octane offense at full strength. And I think that yesterday they won a narrow victory, but let's not discount the Colts. I mean, they beat the Chiefs, and they're a top 10 defense. I think that he was able to collect yards with his legs, and that's the way that he went. But yeah, I do think that teams are going to say, okay, let's sit back and see if you can, pick us apart with your arm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think what you said, needs to kind of be, that Colts team had been pretty good defensively this year to the point that they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Where they have struggled is the quarterback play and their offensive line play has been a problem for them. But their defense has been pretty good this year. Now, it's not like Philadelphia lit them up, but they have been a pretty solid defense. And I thought when push came to shove, I was impressed that they were able to knuckle up and run the ball late in that game against a pretty good Colts run defense. And I think it'll be interesting moving forward here if they continue to go that route. But without Dallas Goedert, one of the problems, and Moshe talked about this last week, and I want to get your take, is when you have Stahl on the field, that essentially says we're running. If you put Calcaterra or Jackson on the field, that essentially says we're going to throw. So you wonder what can they do to kind of, hide what their intentions are.
No, and that's exactly right. They have the backups behind Dallas Goedert. They all have specialized roles, and it's a tell when any of them are on the field. Now, none of the three players are, they're not realistic options. Tyree Jackson, it's a Hail Mary. I mean, it's a pipe dream that you're going to see him go out there and all of a sudden be Jimmy Graham, right? He's an athletic player, nice traits and this and that, but he's behind those guys for a reason. He has a long way to go. He's very new to the position. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up looking at bringing in a veteran tight end, knowing how instrumental the tight end position is for Jalen Hurts and the way that this offense functions. When you see a guy perhaps like a Jared Cook or the countless veterans out there that are out there, that you want to find like a well-rounded player and not necessarily ones that are blocking specialists or merely receiving specialists that have blocking deficiencies. And I really do think that you're going to see them implement Zach Pascal a lot more than they have. I think that he offers a lot, and I think he's going to be really pivotal for this team down the stretch. Just his blocking on the perimeter and just his veteran prowess and his ability to kind of work the short to intermediate routes as well and be a reliable presence for Jalen Hurts. So I think that's a player to watch as well.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, InsideTheBirds.com, and, of course, it's Thanksgiving, so we will not have Andrew on Thursday, but he was kind enough to join us on the day after an Eagles game. 17-16, they get it done, but the NFC got very interesting yesterday with some of the results. Andrew, happy Thanksgiving to you, buddy, and we will talk to you after the holiday.
Guys, always a pleasure. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.